open till it shatters through the ocean. I wanna make shockwaves.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and dogs and other farm animals, this is Renee. Welcome to episode 34 of Kerbal Space Chronicles, and I was not expecting to do another launch from the launch pad. As you can see, this rocket has a lot of problems. Namely, I'm burning through electrical power at an alarming rate. So, this rocket was originally going to be a, really quick, I'm gonna go into slow-mo just to allow myself a bit of time to talk. Oops. That's definitely not the button I want for slow-mo. I'm going to go into 0.2 times physics warp for a little bit of time here. But this rocket has a lot of problems. It was originally going to be an asparagus stage design, meaning I was going to run fuel lines from a pair of stages to the center stage, and then stage each of them off in turn. That didn't work. There's a bug with the fuel lines where if I attach it to one part and then go to connect to the second part, it'll just jump, detach from the first part, and act like it's not attached to anything. So that didn't work. So I'm going to have to do what is probably the strangest possible setup for how to do an asparagus staging. And the first thing I have to do is I have to lock those top propellant tanks, because otherwise the Thunder Aerospace fuel balancer will take all the fuel out of them. Now, which two stage first? Okay, it's these two. Okay, that's the center. That's that one. That's the nose cone. That's that one. That's probably the other nose cone. Okay, so it's this set that has to transfer out. Oh, this is going to be so bleeding tricky. Because what I have to do is I also have to set up the liquid hydrogen to transfer out. Make sure it's still these four. Okay, oxidizer. Just making sure I still have the parts. So what I have to do is I basically have to burn this stage to completion, shut down, switch everything over, fire the engines again, hope I haven't fallen out of the sky, and then do it again, except without the whatever. You'll see what I mean when we actually get this thing going. Like this is going to be one of my hardest takeoffs ever, and I've spent almost 3 minutes talking about it. What I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and return to normal time acceleration. Switch back over into my usual physics mode. Light the engines. Ready to go. Okay, so yeah, this is going to be one of my hardest launches ever, and I'm not even sure it's going to do what I want it to do. They're also not transferring out at the same rate. That's not good. I really don't like that. No, I still need to be going out. Yeah, it's really starting to unbalance. Okay, balance. Screw it. Screw that idea. I need to have it balancing much faster. This is not good. I may have screwed things up. Okay, oxidizer. I need to balance. Screw asparagus staging until I can fix the... I am going way outside of my flight path here. I need to be, like, seriously pitched over. course, the problem is, without that staging idea, I'm not sure I'm going to get this thing to the moon. That could be a problem. But I guess we will find that out. In the meantime, I'm going to turn it back over to future me to see how things went. And this is future me back in control here. So, we've got the return of the 4x bug. After I decided to scrap asparagus staging, it turned out to be a pretty normal launch. I just continued burning all 5 of the rocket engines. Not actually sure why I had tack up. I just checked to make sure everything was good, and then I got rid of it. But continuing to adjust my trajectories, we made our way into orbit. And I was already noticing that this was a slow exit. It would have probably been a lot easier, and you see how I would have staged away and that things exploded in that case because they got hit by a rocket engine. But had things worked correctly, we would have lost 2 sets of rockets, then another 2 sets, and then we would have continued on the center set and probably got more Delta V out of it too, which kind of annoys me, but I guess that's just how things shook out. We got through the second stage and then on to the third stage, which proved to be strangely slow. However, we did manage to limp the spacecraft into orbit. However, my concerns about staging were proving to be prescient. By the time we had this vehicle into orbit, we were down to only about 1,200 meters per second in the transfer stage. Normally I want to have about 1,900, because that's what I need to get out to the moon. So we were already short there. And there was only about 2,500 to 2,800 of 2,800 meters per second delta V in the lander stage, the lander and return stage. So I was becoming increasingly concerned that we were not going to make it back if we tried to land on the moon. I'd have to try and get my Kerbals down on the moon, rush a spacecraft together that could land on the moon within about 30 days, because they only had about 30 days of oxygen on that fuel cell. They couldn't last any longer than that. They'd have to be picked up in 30 days, and I'd have to do that with Kerbal construction time and all of that rot. So we decided to see how the burnout to the moon went. I actually skipped one maneuver node because I would have had to start burning. I would have been late. And I've got science alert burbling away in the background, but we'll tend to the science later. We, of course, flip around, light the engine, and begin our translunar injection burn, the burn out to the moon. Of course, the transfer stage does all it can, then I deploy the gear, light the lander stage, which I did not want to do at this point. I wanted to use it for, at most, orbit, landing, and return. That's all I wanted. I wanted to get as much out of that transfer stage as possible, but I think the inability to asparagus killed that vehicle. So we just fine-tune our trajectory out to the moon, make sure I have the periaps I want. I get in a little closer than normal. I go for about 38 kilometers. At this point, I only have about 2,000 meters per second of delta V. And by the time I get into the moon's orbit, I can tell almost immediately this is not going to be a landing, which is unfortunate for Valentina and the other crew member whose name I can't actually pronounce at the moment. But it is what it was, and we decided to make it a science mission, because you see how many science experiments I can actually spam there, and I can do more than that, because I can restore the experiments that we have with the scientist. So yeah, you see we're doing about 1,600 meters per second. I only have 1,981, I think it was, meters per second of delta V, about 2,000 of delta V, and so just slamming on the brakes to land would have been basically all my fuel. I wouldn't have been able to make orbit, much less get back to Kerbal. So that definitively put paid to the moon landing plans. Instead, this became a science mission. This became more glorious science spam. We overshot the orbit burn a little. I raised my periaps to make sure I wouldn't slam into the ground, and then we just began glorious science spam. I figured I'd stay in orbit a few orbits because I had plenty of life support. This thing was meant to land, maybe do a couple hops, stay on the moon, go into orbit for a few days, then return. So I definitely overbuilt this spacecraft, and whether or not that played a role might be an issue that I have to resolve in future iterations. I might also have to build a more powerful launcher, too. Because I basically did what I could with the parts that I wanted to use, but those parts did not work. Of course, for some reason, this capsule just does not collect science the same way as most of my other capsules do. Usually I can just click a button, and it will collect all the science that's been done on the vehicle, but at this point it wasn't doing it. So I had the ship manifest open, and you just saw me taking the scientist out there to restore some experiments and do some EVA reports. One thing that is nice is that I didn't used to be able to restore the solar particle collectors from DMagic. This is the universal storage version. That's why it's in that little slide. Those are really cool, but I wish I had the 1.875 meter versions. That would probably have helped too. Having that be a little shorter of a rocket and putting a little more fuel therefore in the lander stage. That probably would have helped the design immensely. But alas, we didn't do that, and I wanted to try and make a landing with the parts that I had, but it just didn't work. So we continue for a few orbits, hopefully catching some of the more obscure biomes. One of the ones that I had a lot of trouble with was the canyons, and because you see, they just go by in a flash. I mean, they're going by in an even bigger flash for you guys, because you're watching this at 4 times video time acceleration, on top of the on-rails time acceleration that I'm doing in the video. So we just continued orbit after orbit, picking up whatever science we could, transmitting it back to Kerbal, sometimes keeping it, putting our life support supplies to good use. However, it soon became time to plan our return. I checked the map, and it turns out MechJeb had overdone it a little bit, so I'd have to dial back the maneuver if I wanted to re-enter correctly and avoid just slamming into the atmosphere and probably pile driving into 1,000 pieces. That's not good news. So I just sort of pulsed the time at this point, because we were getting close to the canyons biome. And I'd hoped I'd be able to get both the science, but it turned out that my solar particle collector actually needed to be restored. So I hurried up, got my scientist out, but that collector is really hard to reach. You see just how much I'm having to fiddle around with it. I actually ended up switching camera modes, and by the time I actually had it sorted out, I was in a completely different biome where I get nothing for it. And of course, we had a maneuver to make, so that was disappointing. But carry on regardless, we wanted to do everything we could with this spacecraft, even though it didn't actually land. Soon enough, though, it was time to re-enter. We did our last little bits of science. Retracted the landing gear as sort of an official end to our sort of ignominious end to our mission. Make our burn. There's still more science we can do on our way out. Because I do have the solar things restored, and I can also grab the aeronautical experiment, the little ones, the mini labs, the sounding rocket mini labs that I love to carry everywhere, because they're just little bits of extra science, Nothing particularly useful, but it adds up. I mean, if you do it around the moon, do it around Mimas, do it around Phoebe, do it around Phoebe's moon, do it around the sun, and around other planets, it actually builds up to a not insignificant amount of science. So I do carry those around, especially if I've got a scientist crew member on board who can EVA and restore them, because then I only need 1 copy. Great stuff. I'm even still doing science all the way back into Kerbal orbit and messing around with Science Alert, trying to get it to alert me for everything, but that we will see if that has any sort of effect. I'd had considered implementing time warp, but because of the things that we're actually about to see, I'm not sure I want to mess around with too many things that can cause time to very quickly change. I started to close up the service module, but I'd actually left the thermometer and barometer open, so I opened it back up, pulled those back in, and then closed up, and then did my usual bleed burn, just use the remaining fuel I had to suppress my apoaps and get a better re-entry, because of course I don't have very much ablator. However, what we learn in this re-entry is that ablator actually turns out to be the least of our worries, as something happened during re-entry that nearly jeopardized the whole mission, and actually almost crashed my game at one point. Here it is. You serious? So, it's supposed to have a 1.25 meter heat shield, but it actually sticks out past it. What the hell kind of capsule is this? I don't do this very often, but I am going to ignore max temperature because that's a little ridiculous. Yeah, look at that. It's supposed to have a 1.25 meter heat shield, but it doesn't actually fit a 1.25 meter heat shield. That's one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. I'm going to have to figure out who designed that mod. So we're going to get a beautiful flame trail all the way in, on top of the re-entry effects. That annoys me. Although that does look like a much more genuine re-entry in my opinion. Yeah, I don't do that very often, but what the hell, guys? Build your capsule to fit a 1.25 meter heat shield and then it doesn't actually fit a 1.25 meter heat shield? Either way, at least that means we will re-enter safely, though I'm kind of annoyed at how I had to do it. Because that's not cool. I mean, if you're going to give us the capsule, give us the heat shield to go with it. That way we don't have to do stupid shit like this. I mean, come on. I don't like having to cheat in my Kerbal Space Program games because capsule design is asinine. See, that heat shield would have been plenty good to take it, but the capsule sticks out past it, and there's no heat shield that fits that size, so we're definitely not using that capsule anymore. Go to 5 times just to let it cool down. And now we'll go ahead and re-enable max temperature. Okay. Well, crew report will definitely do. Now time to show off something new I have. I actually have a drogue chute. I have a double chute in this system now, which is nice. You know what? Heat shield, you were useless. There it goes. Well, I could land on the drogue chute. There it goes. Whoa! What the hell? Okay, back to future me for a moment. So what actually happened here is I tried to slow down to 2 times physical time acceleration, but instead it kicked me up to 10 times, which caused the spacecraft to go all sorts of silly buggers. I think I'm going to reduce the top bound of the hyperphysics warp to keep that from happening again, but either way, I reloaded the game from an autosave and actually discovered several things. First thing, the heating of the capsule was a bug. It was not supposed to heat up like that. I actually ran it through after reloading from the autosave, and it proceeded through the reentry just fine. So that was a bug. I'm not sure if it was an atmosphere bug, a heating bug, or something with the capsule bugged up, but that was a bug. Second thing, we did actually get the crew down on the ground, and we're up to about 240 science, and you'll see how I spend that in the next episode. In the meantime, thanks everyone so much for watching. If you liked it, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that notification bell, check out Twitch and Discord in the description. If you really like us, please consider supporting the channel on on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, also in the description. In the meantime, this is Renia signing off. Thanks for watching. Take care.